Great question to fire things off with. And here we
We go to
are.
the sight and sound list.
We
The
go from
fucking Bowery Boys movies at Monogram.
we go to sight and sound from the sight and sound list to putting brains in monkeys, and we've got a bunch of monkeys here with brains in them to talk tonight. We're kicking off C is for Camp. Thank you for joining us in the spoiler room, venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping. Hey, this one was a spin cap. Your favorite drink and sitting with us. Oh, look
Got
at you!
water. I've got water and coffee.
You're like two fisting it tonight, Ian. And
That's on the patrons only show.
Yeah, that's the patrons only fans. That's the Special Mark Productions only fans, where Ian is two fisting. And yes, you hear my right hand man, a guy keeps coming back for more, Mr. Ian Simmons. And tonight, folks, not only are we kicking off C is for Camp Month, and we're talking about a classic, but I've got a gentleman here who I've known for a while. We've talked online. We actually got to meet at the Twisted Dreams Film Fest. He is the gentleman responsible for, let me see, it's between Cadaver Christmas and Camp Massacre. Here it is. Caesar and Otto's Deadly Xmas, right here. Joe Randazzo wrote this. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the spoiler room, sir.
I'm amazed you have a copy of that. Thank you for having a copy of that. And I should point out, I did co-write with Dave Canfield, but I should not. I would be wrong to say that I was responsible for that film. He did like 97% of the work on that movie, and like he.
Wait, is that Dave Canfield, the critic?
Dave Campfield?
No.
Oh, okay.
No,
So I know a Dave Canfield in Chicago. Like, wow, that'd be weird.
No, he's in New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's based out of New York. We both grew up in New York, met at a film festival in Cleveland, and started making movies together in LA.
Wow.
You are cross country personality.
Every
and
film we made together was in LA.
Wow. Well, that's where you make films, right? That's the only place they ever make films.
That's
LA,
what I hear.
Right? That's what I hear. Well, they didn't make tonight's film in LA. We are looking at 1981's The Burning. And Joe, since you are our guest, you're new to the spoiler room, you get to do the synopsis of The Burning. So please give us the quick synopsis of what The Burning is about.
Well, for starters, it's definitely not an LA movie. This is a very New York movie, and you can hear it in all the accents. Well, a prank on the caretaker of a summer camp goes awry, and the kids accidentally set him on fire. I don't know why he's sleeping with a canister of gasoline next to his mattress, but he is. And at the hospital, a doctor is showing a new doctor around, and decides to show him this charred body in the burn unit that is unlike anything he's ever seen before. The hand, grabs the doctor, and we are off. And now a bunch of kids go to the camp, and one by one, or no, in one case multiple. Get massacred by Cropsy, the burned alive caretaker of the summer camp. Lots of pranks, lots of people who would become future movie stars, lots of people who would become future major producers, major directors, major special effects people worked on this. That was watching the opening credits was like a who's who of people. But I mean, it's your standard slasher. It's your standard summer camp slasher where, yeah, you have a bunch of kids playing pranks, being horny, and screwing around and doing whatever, while there's a guy with giant shears taking them all out. And you have your little mix. You have the big muscular jock guy. You have the skateboard kid from Police Academy 4. I don't remember his name. The David Spade's buddy from Police Academy 4.
Yeah.
Jason Alexander, Holly Hunter, Fisher Stevens, wow, Ned Eisenberg. So there's like this amazing cast of people who you never see in like a slasher movie after they became famous, but they're all there getting mad. The nerdy kid from Police Academy 4 is going to play a prank on a girl in the shower, gets caught, and that raises the ire of her boyfriend, who is also a bully. And for some reason, we're supposed to be sympathetic to this kid who is spying on a girl in a shower.
He just
You can
wanted
tell
to
Harvey-
scare her. He just
you can
wanted to
tell
scare
Harvey
her.
Weinstein wrote this. What's he done? What's the kid doing wrong? He was just checking out a girl in the shower. So for some reason, we're supposed to be sympathetic towards him. And yeah, Jason Alexander and Fisher Stevens are, kind of on the nicer end of things, and it's exactly what you expect an '80s summer camp slasher movie to be. I guess, is that a good synopsis?
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
I mean, the kills are
I
really
like that.
cool, which is what you come to these kinds of movies for.
Mhm.
The in particular, the one where they are they're kind of floating towards the canoe that they found that's been missing, and Cropsy is laying in there, and he wipes out like 4 or 5 of them all in one swoop. That was super cool. I think it's one of the better summer camp slasher movies outside of like the Friday the 13th films.
Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say, I agree. I mean, when I first saw this movie about probably 12 years ago, I thought it was, for a while, it went above Friday the 13th in my estimation. This is the horror BFI list, I guess we're talking about. But no, I mean, well, it's Tom Savini doing the gore effects on both films. But what I really liked, what I really responded to was the sleaze, and it wasn't until the Harvey Weinstein stuff came out, and like this time watching it, I was paying attention to those credits, because it was created and produced by Harvey Weinstein, which explains a whole lot. But there is this.
I think
there's
he had a story by credit too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Along with, I think, Brad Gray, the big Uber producer, he produced this, and Holly Hunter was one of the campers. But watching it now, I think I responded to the element of sleaze. Like, it's got this kind of, especially in that opening when Cropsy gets out of the hospital and he goes after that prostitute, there's like a real New York Ripper kind of feel to it. And then when we get to the camp, there aren't, like, the kills are kind of spaced out. There are long stretches where they're stalking through the woods, and it's not Cropsy, it's this creepy kid named Alfred, played by Brian Backer, who a year after this would go on to star as Mark Ratner in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But I liked the characters in this movie, even like the bully character and his girlfriend. They're kind of stock characters, but they have this thing where, like, he's softening up around her, and she's bringing out the best in him. And they have this scene where they're having sex and he finishes too early. Again, kind of shades of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but there's real tenderness to that. Like, he's all embarrassed and she's like, she doesn't want to leave him and everything. I felt bad when they got killed 5 minutes later. Seriously, there's something about this movie that seemed to be more invested in characters than kills, and it saved up that bank of kills so that when you see them, they're like nothing you've ever seen. The bit where the bully kid gets the shears through the neck and is forced back through the woods into a tree. My God, I still don't know how the hell they pulled that off.
I mean, that's the thing. If in a slasher movie you can actually make me care about the characters to some degree, that's very much a good thing, because, like you said, these are kind of stock characters. But I think this was early enough, maybe in the American slasher run, where it hadn't become maybe as formulaic as it would become by the late '80s, where at that point you started kind of you started kind of maybe we shouldn't, but I feel like we kind of started identifying with the killer a little more towards the late 80s.
Well, yeah, I mean, the killers in general, it's interesting. I've seen people talk about it, but the killers end up becoming the pop culture icons, and people start rooting for them. You start going to the Jason films, Friday the 13th. You don't care. You give two shits about the campers. You just want to see how he's going to off these kids. Or Freddy, what wild and crazy crap is he going to come up with in the dream world? Or, even Mike Myers, in some respects, how is he going to brutally kill someone? I mean, you had all those.
The answer is the love guru.
The love guru.
Sorry.
Wrong, Mike Myers.
Oh,
but
sorry.
That did kill a lot of things, including his career for a little bit. But you're right. The Burning. I love watching films like this that start off in a genre, because you could see them trying to get a feel for what's going to work, and so they're experimenting. So, like you both said, we have characters in here we actually care about. They're not just bad guy fodder, kind of like we had in the first Friday the 13th as well. In the first one, which we reviewed a couple of years ago as our last film for the 52 Degrees to Kevin Bacon. You actually care about they've got a little bit more to them than just being, oh, here's the jock, here's the cheerleader, here's the bully, and I like that. Even what I thought was interesting too is, even though you had the bully, they were still all in the same cabin together, Alfie and the bully and everything. So it wasn't like what we've seen later on, to where it is so mean-spirited bully that he can't even stand to be around the guy. There's still enough civility between them.
And that's the really interesting thing watching it this time, the kind of social dynamic, because Glazer is the bully, and he kind of, after the whole shower incident, he's basically saying, if I ever see you again, I'm going to beat the shit out of you, to Alfie or Alfred. Yeah. They call him Alfred. That's like, yeah. But anyhow, like the next scene, they're all in the cabin together in bunks, and they're just kind of hanging out. And yeah, Glazer's kind of grouchy, but it doesn't have that same impact of like, oh, the bully and his prey are staying in the same cabin. But Dave, the Jason Alexander character, he kind of keeps everybody sort of in line. He's like the crazy good time guy, the ringleader. So it's almost like, you guys just don't do your nonsense whenever I'm around. And that seems to keep things in check somehow.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing you did, because it's literally, they are on the raft, or he's on the raft with the girls. They shoot him with the pea shooter, and right in the next, he's literally saying, "I'm going to kill you guys. I'm going to kill you guys," and then it's literally the next scene.
That's right. I had missed that. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I had missed. Overlooked the pea shooter thing. Yeah, thanks for correcting the record. But yeah, that was even worse than the shower scene. It was the pea shooter thing. I thought for sure someone was going to get a bloody nose.
Scene. Like you're sitting there wondering, is he going to break in on this on Fisher Stevens and the other kid playing cards? Oh no, he's right there. He literally could be beating the shit out of them right now, and he's not. He's just like, cool. It's over. You guys shot me with a pea shooter. I'm fine.
But I mean
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I like that approach better than what you would get later on, where there would be they would continue that hatred all the way through with the Glazer character, to where, they'd have to have him in different bunks, because the minute he showed up, he'd start beating on Alfie or the group, or they'd have to put Glazer like in solitary or something, later on. Yeah, well, in that,
it's kind of like the way I grew up. Like I grew up in a neighborhood in Brooklyn where my friend and I might get into a fight, and we might both go home bloody and bruised, but the next day we're hanging out again, like nothing ever happened. And that's kind of like what I felt like here. Is it was just kind of one of those things where it was like, yeah, it happened. We had our little moment. Well, we don't see it. I don't know if anything. I don't remember there being any reference to anything happening. And then they're just everything's cool again.
Well, I think what helps is like Ian said, Jason Alexander, who if you know him from when he was popular, seeing him in a character like this is weird because
it's really jarring.
It's jarring because he's not being, Jason Alexander that we know.
Well, he's also
Costanza.
Yeah,
right. But he's also, kind of built, he's like a cool guy, and he's almost like a jock. He's like a good time jock. And it's weird to think that he started playing George Costanza like only 9 years after this movie came out.
Yeah, it wasn't too long after this. Yeah.
But it also brings to mind when you see the mess hall, like the lunchroom scenes, the ages of the people at this camp seem to go from like 11 to 29. Who are these campers?
Yeah, you have this one girl, Tiger, who looks like she's like 10, and she's sitting next to these. I'm not even going to call them girls. I'm going to call them women because they look like they're like 19 to 22. It's like, wait a minute, what is going on at this camp?
Right, and like there's the two. I'm just going to name them Hero Guy and Hero Girl, like the two lead counselors, I guess. They're kind of reprimanding people like they reprimand Alfie when he's caught in the shower and all that, or outside the shower. But I couldn't figure out if like they were the lead counselors and Alfred and Jason Alexander and those guys were like the non-lead, like the regular counselors, or if they were supposed to be kids at that camp, because you never really see them doing anything except screwing around.
I'm not clear on that either. That's one thing I could not figure out from this. Were they staff or were they campers?
Well,
no idea.
That's what I couldn't figure out, because you see them and you're like, okay, maybe the group that we see like Glazer and that, maybe they're counselors, but they're not. They're kids. But then you got the counselors who are only a year or two older, the actors wise, than the actors who are playing the kids, but they're supposed to be like this bigger span of time. It's the A-League. It's the early 80s for sure. Or just, we've covered the 1988 films where we're like, those are not high school kids. That is not a freshman.
Well, like if you watch like this versus like Friday the 13th 6, though there's a very clear distinction between who's the counselors and who's the campers in that one, because the kids are all super young and the counselors are obviously 20-somethings. So, and I mean, also, like if Jason Alexander's a counselor, is he going to be going and buying condoms for this guy and Hustler for this guy? And
well, that's because I thought everybody else was, except for maybe Alfie. I thought everybody was counselors. That's why I was like, oh, okay.
Well, to answer your question, Joe, yes, the answer is yes, because this is a Harvey Weinstein movie. But no, I mean, the weird thing is, and we're getting all meta, but Brian Backer, who played our Alfred, as I mentioned, he was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. He was born in 1956. So he was 25 when he made this movie. The next year, he was playing a character in Fast Times who was supposed to be 15.
Well, not only that, but he was born a year before the what you said, hero girl, a woman, which is Michelle, who was born in 57. So Alfie, who was supposed to be the younger, is actually a year older than the counselor.
I can't keep up.
Of cinema.
The magic of cinema. It doesn't matter much, but it would be nice if the counselors would have had like counselor shirts or something, or camp shirts.
Yeah, that could have been something. Yeah,
it wouldn't matter because they're too busy taking them off. That's not a complaint.
80s. So there you go. But you're right. I dug the kills. I like watching this. It's interesting to see how this gets overshadowed a lot, I think, still even today, over Friday the 13th. And I would say it's just as good. It's in the running, at least. I think maybe it's because of the Cropsey character.
I think it's better than Friday the 13th. I think the problem I think the problem with it is maybe the accessibility, because Friday the 13th was a major studio production. That was a Paramount series,
Right.
or at least it became Paramount. The first one I know was independent, and then Paramount kind of went from there. I think, but I remember growing up when I was like 14 or 15, I bought a copy of Creature Features by John Stanley, which was like this thick Bible that was just full of like his horror movie reviews from like all these decades that he had been reviewing movies, and I would go through them, and I'd put like a little X next to the ones I wanted to see, and The Burning had been there with an X next to it for a long time, and I couldn't find it, and I think that's part of why. I mean, it's fondly remembered by people like us, but yeah, you ask somebody who's just like surface level, they know who Jason Voorhees is.
Right.
But I remember just reading the review of it and reading that, this is this sounds really, really good. And it was just one night randomly, like I found out it was going to be on IFC, and I threw it on and I watched it then, and that's the first time I saw it. Because yeah, for a long time I couldn't find this thing anywhere. I went to all the video stores around me. I could never find The Burning. Every Friday the 13th was there.
Well, yeah.
Every Nightmare on Elm Street except 2 was there, which is in hindsight, very conservative neighborhood in Brooklyn. Very, very old school people. I kind of understand now why Nightmare on Elm Street 2 was never at the video store. They never bought that one. But yeah, this was one of those movies that like just never came across, just never found it anywhere. Blockbuster didn't have it. None of the little video stores, none of them had it. I think that's part of why it's not as well known, but I still think it's, by people who see it, everyone who sees it seems to like it.
Well, it is also a movie that's sort of made for the home video market. Because
kinda, yeah.
I feel like if I had seen this in the theater when it came out, I would have been disappointed by the raft scene. Because when people talk about The Burning, a lot of them talk about the raft scene, and that's how I think I had heard about it. I think I was listening to Dead Pit Radio or something, or talking about it, and they're like, "Oh, the raft scene in The Burning." So I watched it. I had to go back and rewind and watch that scene a few times because it's so spectacular, but it's over so quickly. Like once Cropsey shows up and he starts hacking at everybody, in my mind, it's like this big drawn out thing because he kills like 5 people, as you mentioned, but it's over in like less than a minute. So yeah, it's something that, again, if you're watching at a theater, you have to kind of absorb everything and then you move on. Again, I had to go back and rewatch this scene, partially because of the special effects and also to just see how everyone was dispatched and horribly murdered.
Well, I mean, that's the movie magic, right? They cut away quick so you can't quite tell the effect, how either quality or whatnot. But you're right, they're all spectacular kills on that raft, but they fly back like they fly.
You know the intensity of how hard he's stabbing them, because you'll see the shears come down, and you won't even see what it does to them, but you see that it's now piercing the floor. That's how hard he went through them.
Yeah,
so
and there was
that intensity.
And there was one, I think it might have been the first strike. It just glances one of the girls across the temple. So it's almost like maybe he went and finished her off after the camera left, but it's also possible that she just got, concussed and fell out and drowned in the lake,
There was the one that fell in the lakes. That's possible too. Or she could still be there.
Yeah.
Haunting the camp after Cropsey's dead.
Well, and the way this film is edited is put together really well too, because you get that raft scene and then you get some scenes in between, and then all of a sudden you have the crew on the shore. They're like, "Oh, hey, the raft is back, but where is everyone?" And then you have Michelle go out there and get that wonderful Jaws scene where the arm comes out, and lands on her, and then the body shows up and she just freaks out. And I loved, though, what was interesting is you could tell she didn't sell it quite so well. You could see her grab the arm and then purposely kind of drag it across her chest so that there's blood.
That's just Savini telling her to do that. You can just imagine him telling, yeah, you got to bring the arm back this way. But speaking of the editing, you noticed who the editor was, right?
I missed it.
Jack Shoulder, who directed Alone in the Dark, Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
That's right.
So, yeah, that's part of what I was saying earlier. Was there's like this pedigree of people that worked on this film. So many of them went on to do so many amazing things, and he's one of them. He ended up directing a couple of, real cult classics after this.
Well, here's the thing, Joe. It just occurred to me. Maybe it wasn't the ultra conservatism in your neighborhood that led people to not have Elm Street 2 on the shelf in the video store. Maybe someone just had a vendetta against Jack Shoulder.
Well, I never saw Alone in the Dark in my video stores either. Maybe they just didn't like Jack Shoulder. Maybe that's
Connect the dots. That's all I'm saying.
making sense. Starting to make sense.
It's all coming together now. It's all coming together. But this is one of those films where a lot of people, because I've grown such a fondness for indie films over the years, and people, always kind of crap on B horror or whatever. I'm like, how many big stars cut their teeth on B horror because someone needed talent. They were cheap, so they got them, and they go on to huge things. And this film, like you both said, is a prime example of that. There's so many people front and behind the camera that end up going on to doing bigger, better things. And that talent comes across even in this early film. It's a solid slasher film. Even if it does tick off a lot of your exploitation angles, but even that, the exploitation part is not as Weinstein as some other films, but it's there. But
well, and this is something that I hadn't picked up on the last time I watched The Burning, because that was pre Me Too and all that. But there is the bit where, oh my gosh, what was her name? Eddie and Karen. Mm-hmm. They go skinny dipping. Mm-hmm. And Eddie is trying to get into Karen's pants the entire movie up until this point. And they go out in the lake, and they're both naked, and they're making out, and he starts getting really aggressive with her, and she's like, stop, he won't stop. And finally, she basically forcefully makes him back off, and then she storms out into the woods, and then she's horribly murdered. There's a part of me that was thinking like Harvey Weinstein is sitting there going like, yeah, that's what you get, lady who rejected me.
I hate to laugh at that, but
wow.
So I don't know if I'm projecting based on recent history, but like I can't not think of that now.
but it was one of those things when I was watching it today, and I think this is the first time I've seen this movie probably since around that time also, that I was probably thinking like, yeah, this does kind of feel like this could be a thing where Weinstein's like, yeah, good, get her. I don't know. But I definitely had that feeling watching it where I was like, oh, this feels so uncomfortable now after everything that's come out. But
yeah, if you're going to recommend it to people now, you almost have to black out like the opening credits.
Yeah. I'm kind of wondering, is this the first Miramax movie? It might be.
It might be.
They've been around, I think they were around since the 70s doing stuff, but as far as like, I don't know if I'm going to get this wrong. I think they did like everything, like educational films, exploitation. So I don't know that it's the first, but it's definitely early in their career. Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely early. I mean, also to back up Mark's point about the, being able to get talent cheaply for these movies. Friday the 13th, Kevin Bacon was getting rides from people from New Jersey where they were shooting Friday the 13th to New York because he was on the stage in a bit part on Footloose. So yeah, you're getting these people who are, especially if you're in New York. In New York, you have access to really talented aspiring actors who are maybe not making a lot of money, and you can probably get them in your slasher movie, not very inexpensively. So and here, yeah, that the cast in this thing is phenomenal for. because it wasn't
Yeah.
too long after this that Fisher Stevens was a huge star. Like what, 3-4 years later?
Yeah, in Short Circuit and many other things.
Yeah.
Short Circuit 2. But but no, I just like I didn't remember Jason Alexander having such a big part when I watched it. But yeah, he's a star of this movie, and he also, I mean, he goes through a trauma with the raft kids and everything, but he's almost part of that Friday the 13th Part 2 contingent, like the people who stay behind at the bar instead of going back to camp. These guys actually go back to camp from the island, and they survive because all the action's happening over on that weird canoeing trip island. But Holly Hunter, yeah, she has like maybe 2 lines in the movie, and I think they're both like background kind of incidental things, like ha ha ha, at a campfire story, and then crying and coming back. Yeah.
If you didn't know, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know she was in it, really. If you didn't already know that, yeah. But that's the other thing. Friday the 13th Part 2. I saw a lot of similarities between this and Friday the 13th Part 2, which, I guess they were kind of made around the same time. So they came out around the same time.
I think so. Yeah, 81.
So you kind of don't know if one inspired the other in any way, because I think they both were probably being made around the same time. But there's that similarity. There's the campfire scene where they're talking about the legend of Cropsey. And at some point before we wrap up, I do want to tell you guys there actually was a legend of Cropsey in New York growing up. So I think that may have figured in a little bit.
Well, I was reading about this film, and I know we're talking more than just a film, but that's the type of film that this is. There was another film that came out around the same time called Madman that they had to change because it was basically the same movie or same character anyway.
It was another New York movie, and Paul Ehlers, who played Madman Mars, is actually in a short film that Dave Canfield and I made in New York shortly before we made Deadly Xmas. So
nice.
Yeah, I'm kind of proud of that. we have him playing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Whoa,
that's awesome.
Super cool. And when you hear him speak, he's nothing like what you'd expect the guy who played Madman Mars to be. Very soft spoken, But that's another one. I have the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray. That one right there. So it's another one. I love a lot of those movies. But yeah, Mad Men was another one very similar to this. I didn't even think of that one. That came out, I think, again the same time roughly as this.
Yeah.
Also,
well, I mean, talking about Cropsey, that's the one I think weak part of the film, and where I would give Friday the 13th the edge is the origin story. Because Cropsey, we're told at the beginning, like the kids of the camp are like, yeah, we're going to get this son of a bitch. He hates me. He's mean or whatever. I'm like, I hate you. I would be mean towards you. You guys seem like a bunch of little shits. And like later on, it's like, yeah, he was a drunk. He was abusive to the kids. Like, I need to see that, because otherwise I have the word of these punk teenagers. And I'm not 95 years old, I swear, but they're just setting this guy on fire. I'm like, I don't know if he's like a drunk who's abusive or if he's special needs or what's the deal, but it just seems like, yeah, I can understand why he would want to come back and get revenge on these kids. Now, if he is a Freddy Krueger type character who in life was abusive and like a mean son of a bitch, then that adds to that element of sleeves. But I never quite figured out Cropsey as a person. It almost works better if there is no mythos behind him. He's just some dude who shows up with the shears and kills people.
Well, I mean, in the case of this movie, there really isn't much of a mythos built. I don't know if it was the kind of familiarity of people growing up in New York, because the myth of Cropsey came about after the shutdown of the Willowbrook State School and the Seaview Hospital in Staten Island. Basically, the Willowbrook State School is was somewhere to send, I guess, special needs kids that parents didn't want to deal with, and this is a really ugly thing. Geraldo Rivera, incidentally, became famous because he ended up getting it shut down. They were very abusive to the kids. Geraldo Rivera did an expose on ABC where they showed the horrible conditions in the hospital, children made to lay in their own feces for days on end. And he said when he went in there with a camera crew completely unexpected because a doctor tipped him off, and they were just filming all this stuff, and there's all these children crying and everything. So it's a really ugly, ugly incident. So you could see where, and then late 70s, early 80s, some kids in Staten Island start disappearing, and the legend was that it was Cropsey, who was a janitor, or I don't remember if he was a janitor at Seaview or if he was a janitor at the Willowbrook State School, but both were apparently abandoned hospitals. And it was, if you do this, if you do these things that you shouldn't be doing, if you do drugs, if you drink, if you have premarital sex, Cropsey's going to get you. And I don't know if they just thought that because there was this mythos in the greater New York City area, maybe they thought it would resonate more and they didn't need to do much. Maybe they thought just throwing the name Cropsey out there when really it's just a local thing. He never got to like that Jeffrey Dahmer level where he was like getting national headlines. Because outside of New York, I don't think anybody's ever heard of it. And that was one of the things that I brought up to Mark when he suggested, hey, we're doing The Burning and, we're doing these movies. I was like, The Burning. And I want to come on there because I don't know if anybody even knows that this was actually based on a real legend, sort of. And I don't know if they ever actually did anything, or if they just thought the name, like they thought there was more name recognition there than maybe there was. And maybe we wouldn't have to give him much of a backstory. But that's basically in a nutshell. The guy who they believe was Cropsey was eventually caught in 1987, and he's been in prison for I think every day since.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was part of it. Is I kind of wanted to get out here and wanted to be like, did you guys ever hear of this? Do you guys know that this was based on supposedly a real legend?
Mark, you go first.
No, I had no clue. I just knew Cropsey. I didn't know this was actually based off of a real legend. But it sounds like Cropsey was actually the Zodiac killer too. So anyway, no, I'm just kidding.
Except that this was literal just child abduction.
Right.
Well, the thing is, I was gonna say, because you posted, you mentioned there was a documentary called Cropsey. You sent a link to it because it's up on YouTube for free from Gravitas Ventures. And it's weird. It's not pirated or anything. It's just like on their YouTube channel. Like you can watch it for free.
I guess they're done making money with it.
Yeah. Well, because I started watching it this afternoon while I was working. I had on like, are these people actors? And I'm like, no, they're not actors. I just have seen this movie before. And I went back and I checked my own website. Sure enough, I reviewed it 12 years ago on Kicking the Seat. And I was going back through my review and I'm like, I did not like this documentary very much. I don't know why.
I today. I rewatched it today and I was like, shit, this is boring.
Well, it's not. I was fascinated by it because it's like a dollar store version of Paradise Lost, where the movie purports to tell like the truth behind the legend of Cropsey, and that's like the first 3 minutes, and then the rest of it is about this guy Andre Rand, who was the one who got sent up the river for not murder but just kidnappings. They never found most of the bodies. He never confessed anything, but it's a fascinating picture of people in the Staten Island area who it's almost like the Elm Street parents who got together. In Freddy Krueger's case, according to that story, he was guilty and there was evidence against him. But in this case, it was just like a giant communal mob who decided this guy had done all these horrible things and they were out to get him. And what struck me then and struck me now is how the entire thing is built around hearsay, rumor, gossip, circumstantial evidence. There were no cameras allowed in the courtroom, so the documentary filmmakers had to like catch people outside. And like at the very end of the documentary, there's one of these concerned moms who says, we'll never know the real version of, or no, sorry, that was the Donna says he just likes being the center of attention, as she's like being photographed on the news, and we see her throughout the film, like showing up. She's formed Friends of Jennifer, which is the name of one of the girls who was kidnapped and murdered. Like the whoring is just all around here. And at the end, the narrator says, and it's the documentary filmmaker, will never know the real version of Andre Rand. So all we have is our version, that of Cropsey. It's the audience who must decide. So pick one. I'm like, no, that's not really how documentaries work, pal.
And there was actually one police officer who said something that really bothered me. And it was, well, we haven't really found the evidence yet, but if we keep digging, I'm like, no, that's not how this works. You make this man guilty, and they're like, well, we will find the evidence to prove him guilty. That's not how this works.
No,
that's not right.
And, Andre Rand is not necessarily a sympathetic character. I mean, you get the idea he was a drifter, maybe a bit of a creep, and he definitely had issues because he's like foaming at the mouth and his eyes are rolling back, and then he's having like these seizure episodes. But I can't paint him as this villain or this boogeyman. And it's weird because the filmmakers never seem to draw the connection or make the connection that they set out in the opening of the film, which is basically Staten Island was known for being a literal dumping ground for garbage and for like mobland killings. And so it's like a place for shady people to come and do shady things because they know they'll never get caught in this giant wasteland of nothingness. So when one guy shows up, it's like, well, right. But that's kind of the case they lay out. But they don't get people in the film to really disagree. There's no like Staten Island pride people be like, no, that's bullshit. Everyone's like, yeah, this town's a dump. But what I love is that they're like, yeah, all sorts of shady people come here from all over and they do God knows what. But we know for a fact that it's this one guy. Like, no, they spend all this time establishing that you could do anything. And there's like this one guy, there was no evidence about anything. Like, it has to be him. Like, why? It could be someone. One of the conspiracy theories on the sort of pro-Rand side is that one of the bodies was moved, I guess, in between like police site investigations. Like, you're damn right. Why not set up the local drifter if you're going to do a killing, 5 feet away from his camp? Yeah, make it look like he did it. I'm not saying I have any proof, but it's as plausible as anything else.
Somebody who everybody already thinks is shady as hell anyway. Yeah, but yeah, that when I rewatched today, I was like, yeah, I was like, this doesn't actually make the case they think it does. But I was watching it expecting to hear more about the legend of Cropsey, and like you said, yeah, it was like, it was the first couple minutes and that's it. That was a little disappointing. But
yeah, I haven't watched it, but now you made it. Now I'm fascinated that I almost want to watch it just because of the fact that you
brew some coffee. It's not that interesting.
The way you described it.
That's the thing. The story itself is interesting. The way it's told is not.
Yeah.
It really does come to life, though, during the Geraldo scenes, because they do show extended sequences from that news broadcast, and that is the most horrifying stuff I've seen in a long time, fiction, documentary, or otherwise, because, yeah, it is just a nightmare scenario, and you wonder, like, how the hell could this go on? And also, is this still going on places? I mean, I know we've evolved and everything in the last 40 years, but I don't know.
I'm not sure either, but
we hope not.
Yeah, you hope so, but there probably is somewhere in some backwater area or something, someplace that's cut off from civilization. But so you're saying the Cropsey in real life is nothing like the Cropsey in our film?
No, I feel like the like the Weinsteins and Brad Gray thought that just like the familiarity with the legend of these disappearing kids was going to be enough to carry to where we don't have to give it any mythos, or maybe just giving them the name for shock value and not realizing that outside of New York, that really didn't mean anything, and that name doesn't mean anything outside of the New York area. So maybe that's
help me out here though. And I don't know if I missed this in the documentary or what, but where the hell does the name Cropsey come from? Because the legend is built around a guy whose name we actually know, Andre Rand.
Well, I mean, the Cropsey legend was in the 70s. It wasn't until like 87, 88 that they arrested Andre Rands. So I
Okay.
don't know
Okay.
where the name Cropsey came from.
Hmm.
But growing up as a kid, what I would hear is Cropsey's going to get you. Cropsey's going to get you. And
So you tested it out, right? You had to test it out. You took a beer and you're like,
he's not crossing the Verrazano to come get me. I'm in Brooklyn. He's in Staten Island.
he ain't showing his face in Brooklyn.
It's a $14 toll, bro.
That's an awful high price to go after some kid drinking. So I get you.
Now,
To just
now
drive
one of the
around Brooklyn in the hopes. Yeah, no, he ain't coming after me.
One of the weird
in my neighborhood, it was closer to us. The actual Cropsey thing was in Staten Island, but the way the people in my neighborhood would tell the story would be that he's hanging out. He might be hanging out at the park down the block here. So you never really knew, but you'd hear the name Cropsey because you'd have all these kids disappearing and it's on the news, and you'd hear, oh, that's Cropsey striking again.
ugh.
At the end of the day, outside of New York, it didn't mean anything. So.
Well, one of the weird details from that documentary, and I hate to blame the victim, and I'm not blaming the victim so much as the victim's family, but there's the one girl who was 7 years old, and she disappeared. She was last seen like at a convenience store buying a bar of soap. She was 7 years old. Her parents sent her to the convenience store at 9:30 p.m. like on a Wednesday. What?
It's the 80s.
That's actually a lot more common than you'd think.
Yeah. That's the 80s.
I know. Okay, but no, here's the thing. It was the late 70s when this happened, because this is the particular incident.
Sure.
But and I've heard that whole thing, like things were different back then. I still think, all right, you're in New York, your kid's 7. It's 9:30 p.m. You're sending them out unattended, and there's also been other disappearances of other children, like in the area. The answer is no.
You never think it's going to happen to you until it does. I think that's what that is. Because
I know, but there's a difference. There's a difference between like, I don't need someone to spot me on this ladder as I go up to my roof versus I think it's a great idea to send my 7-year-old kid out to buy soap at almost 10 o'clock at night in New York.
Well,
and I mean, like 4 p.m. You kind of, okay, maybe because it's just, the kid's just running down the block, but 9:30 p.m. It does get a little sketchy, but that was, it's weird because in my neighborhood, like that was normal. Like it'd be like, like there were kids on my block, very young kids, who would be sent to get a pack of cigarettes for their parents at the store. And the parents would have gone into the store and be like, get him, if I send him to get cigarettes, sell them to him. He's bringing them to me. So there was always like this kind of weirdness around like these areas in New York, right? Or like areas like the one I grew up in, where everybody, like, despite the fact that it's like Brooklyn or Staten Island, like you knew everybody in the neighborhood.
Right.
It's very strange because people never really left. And still to this day, when I go back to my old neighborhood, the same people are living in the same houses as 20, 30, 40 years ago. So it's strange, but everyone knows each other in those areas. So it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that but I mean, if you have, any neighborhood that has a local drifter, you probably shouldn't be sending your kid out at 9:30. My neighborhood did not have a local drifter.
Well,
I just want a T-shirt that says "Local Drifter."
The local drifter.
At least I didn't know about him.
Well, that's highly different than our Cropsey character in here.
It's definitely different.
But what I liked about the Cropsey origin, though we don't get much of his backstory, was what surprised me was how long they have this guy on fire. in this scene for this type of film. I'm like, oh, okay, so they're gonna cut to him on fire, then they're gonna cut away, and he's gonna dive into the water. And it's like, no, he's on fire for like I'm like timing this, going, yeah, yeah, anytime you want to dive into the water or whatnot,
It was pretty spectacular, yeah.
Well, what I found interesting though is that, okay, he comes back to the camp because he wants to kill the camp kids. And one of the people involved was one of the people involved in his lighting on fire, which again, I think shows a difference between this film and the films later on, because later on we would get pardon my comparison, a Halloween Kills or the original Halloween, where he'd be going through, or even where he'd be going through all the people that did him wrong. He would track them down or whatnot. Yeah. And here we get one guy out of that entire group that set him on fire. And it wasn't even the guy that put the skull in his house. This is just one of the random guys. And it's a different camp. It's like a camp on the other side of the lake too. So that's one thing I found interesting, was how it evolves later on, the camp horror and the revenge horror evolve, and what they didn't do, what you normally are used to seeing now. And I think again, that's also its charm, is the fact that you only got one guy, and it's Mr. Hero.
Well, it also seems like an accident. Like you're right. Like, what about the other 5 kids in that gang from the beginning? I feel like it was just a coincidence that Brad happened to be at the summer camp. He recognized Cropsey and felt bad about what he did, but I don't think Cropsey was like reading the paper like, oh, local Brad Johnson is now, head, not even head counselor, head camper at this new, or whatever, at this new camp.
I'm sorry. I'm just picturing the Bert Cropsey at a table with a coffee and a cigarette going.
Oh, he would not have cigarettes anywhere near.
No, he would have
that trauma.
That's true. Yeah, true. You probably want to avoid. I'm trying to believe. Was it Slaughter High where like the a bunch of kids tormented this one nerdy kid and accidentally blew him up or something, and then he came back like a year or two later on April Fool's Day, was like murdering all of them.
Yeah, he had like the weird jester's costume. Yeah.
Yes. Was it Slaughter High?
Yeah, that was Slaughter High, because that's got the great scene where you got the couple going at it on a old bed with metal posts, and he takes a car battery and he attaches it to the metal bed frame while they're going. And so as they're electrocuting, they're just going faster and faster as they burn.
Where Carolyn Monroe, who was like in her 30s at this point, because she was already like 15 years removed from Dracula AD 1972, but she's playing a high school student.
Oh yeah, all the people in that movie are like 35.
And that was the problem I had. And that was the problem I had with this. The only problem I really had with this film was I'm not buying it. Like, any of these are kids. Like, no, like the actual kids we only saw at the mess hall. Otherwise, everyone we follow, you're just like, okay, this is just a group of people. It's like, I don't see them as kids.
Jason Alexander. Maybe it's because I'm used to him as Costanza. I was gonna say Jason Alexander looks really, really young, but even then, who knows? I turned my phone off, so I can't look up how old he was. But maybe it's just because I'm used to seeing him as like the balding, chubby guy, versus seeing him in this.
Well, I think he was born in 59, I think. So he was
in his early 20s.
Yeah, so he was in his early 20s.
Holy crap, he was younger than Brian Backer?
Yeah.
Wow.
They're all about the same age, but those are the older kids and those are the younger kids.
But Brian Backer made a living in the 80s when he was like his late 20s of playing teenagers like all the time for some reason. Hey, more power to you, dude. If you could get it,
Oh yeah.
So,
well, look at
Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Police Academy 4, like all these movies, he's a teenager basically.
We've seen that through the years, though. Some actors that's what they do. I mean, Jennifer Jason Leigh, how long did she play younger characters than what she actually, was as well? Because she always looked, younger. Usually it's actresses who can play a lot younger role than guys, but occasionally
He
you
just
get
had a baby
those-
face, you know. He just had that. He just had a really young face. He always looked really young. Good for him. You could do.
One of the things I loved about this film, and you can tell it shows its budget, but it made me laugh. And I know this sounds bad, but it's during the prostitute kill, which I thought was actually a really interesting setup because it's showing Cropsey practicing basically killing someone before he kills kids in the woods. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna kill this prostitute. Let's see how we do this, you know. But when he kills her, at one point we literally get like a 1930s lightning bolt scene when he kills her. And he didn't even like change the color. It was like from like Dracula or something.
He's alive. That's Frankenstein. But yeah.
I wonder if that was more. That kind of reminded me, I think, more basket case.
Yeah.
The way they did that. I wonder if that was what they were going for with that.
It might have been. She didn't go all the way through the glass though, because they didn't have a budget for the stunt double. So she just gets pushed into the glass.
I kind of wonder, did he kill the doctor in the hospital?
No.
Grabbed his arm and then it goes to credits.
Well, no, he didn't. He just did it to scare, because then they jump ahead a year later. He's wheeling in the chair and they got the voiceovers going. Yeah, we can't fix you because you're just too horribly scarred. Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, because if he would have killed the doctor, they would have arrested him at the hospital. Yeah.
Or it would have been cool if he had escaped and then like disappeared into the woods, and then he cut to 5 years later, and he's been practicing. I guess
he's been practicing.
But yeah, like his weird, like, is that an old mine or what the hell was that set piece at the end? There's like a mine car, it's like something out of Temple of Doom, where Brad and Alfred, they're kind of the final girls in this movie, and they confront Cropsey and the climax of this thing is where everything kind of falls apart, because you talk about showing the budget. When Alfred is in there being chased by Cropsey, or he's kind of like playing hide and seek, at one point he comes across, her name was Kelly, was it right? The girl who got killed in the woods after skinny dipping that I mentioned. He finds her body, but when he sees it, it's just like a still from her death scene. It's had like a shadow filter put over it. I'm like, what? No.
Well, that was the pickups. They were doing the pickups then, so
they need to set that one down, because and they cut back to it. I'm like, no, don't show it again. No, this is.
But it goes along with the lightning bolts that they showed earlier that were just from some old movie that they just decided to.
Well, and then they have like the bits where you see Brad and he's like kind of like this hero shot, and he's like having the trauma flashbacks, or like we're seeing that, oh yeah, this is the kid from one of the kids from before, but it's like the camera's like kind of pushing in on him, and he's like standing like the fire and the sweat. And like we see that when he's facing off against Cropsey, and then at the end, after everything's over, I think they just reused that same shot. Like, this doesn't make sense in either context.
What I really love about our hero guy is the fact of they do the flashback and they show this person. You're like, oh, that's him, and you're like, oh no, wait, no, he's not that guy. He was this kid. No, wait,
I couldn't tell who he was supposed to be either.
Wait, which one of these is he? Oh no, he's the third guy that they show, who just was peeking in the window, who really didn't do anything outside of agreed to go along with this.
Yeah. Like, I'm going to get you, kid. I can barely see through this grimy window and flames.
I mean, how many of them actually had anything to do with it? I think only like one or two kids that were there in the beginning, like, actually had anything to do with the prank itself. I think most of them were just there for the ride.
Yeah. And so he kills a kid who wasn't even the one that put like the skull on his table or anything,
But he was an accomplice. He was there.
He was an accomplice. So makes me wonder that you've got the burning 2, 3, 4, and 5 where he goes after each kid of.
So what we're saying is this is less Slaughter High, more Death Wish, because he goes for revenge, but he never finds the people who actually did anything to him.
That's right.
They
He
get
just
away. They're just out in the ether somewhere.
he just
Never
kills
see where he
bad
kills Jeff
guys. Yeah.
Goldblum.
Guys,
Jeff
guys,
Goldblum never gets his comeuppance from Paul Kersey.
that always rubbed me the wrong way. But no, imagine Charles Bronson is Cropsy.
Oh my God. Death Wish 8, The Burning. There you go. instead of going like this with the guns, he just goes like this.
or no, like a cigarette lighter.
Like a cigarette lighter. We actually have Miss Angelique Bone in the audience watching us. Hey,
Woo.
Angelique, so glad you could join us. And she just says, just put everyone in pigtails and they'll look like kids. So I believe that's what Harvey Weinstein was saying. Oh, wow. Sorry. Too soon? Too much? What? No.
That's me too soon.
That's me too soon. Yeah. So yeah, the Burning. I thank you so much for that legend stuff, Joe, and so glad you could bring that, because I didn't know that, and that just opened my eyes to this altogether and shows just how far separated it was. It was like name only.
This was long before the internet, so
yeah.
Unless a couple of kids disappearing in Staten Island maybe wasn't going to make the news in Wisconsin or Illinois. Whereas, stuff like what Ramirez was doing, or what Son of Sam was doing, or Dahmer was doing, that stuff, is going to be big news everywhere. Yeah. But yeah, I just feel like it was just one of those things where, cause I remember reading something about, I think Brad Gray said that it was based on the Cropsey legend, and kind of watched the movie and I'm like, it really isn't though. I think it's based on You Saw Friday the 13th.
And said, we've got to hop on this train right now. Was there anything that you wanted to talk
Friday
about?
the 13th was a huge hit.
It was a huge hit, and Hollywood copies itself every time. I mean, there was The Illusionist and the other magician movie,
The Prestige.
The Prestige that came out at like the exact same time, which when you saw a trailer, you're like, wait, which one is this? Until the end title, oh, that one. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, they copy themselves constantly. This was before the year of the Asylum pictures, when they just, whatever the big budget one is going to come out, they'll duplicate. they'll mockbuster it.
And God bless them.
Like Morphers or Atlantic Rim.
Atlantic. Oh God.
Transmorphers, Fall of Man, still one of my favorite. That's on my BFI list.
I remember when the Rob Zombie remake of Halloween came out. They came out with a movie called Halloween Night, and the cover of Blockbuster looked exactly like the cover to Halloween.
They've been
doing that forever.
Best
actually,
one I had
calls and when a killer calls. I actually like.
Oh, nice. Best one was when they had H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds that came out to video a month before Tom Cruise's War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
And the reason I know the nightmare of that is because I was friends, go figure, with folks at Hollywood Video, the local Hollywood Video. I'm still friends with them. But when they worked there, they said, yeah, it's a nightmare, because they just got off the phone when I got there. They're like, no, it's not the War of the Worlds with Tom Cruise, because they put H.G. Wells in like the tiniest font, and then it said War of the Worlds. And so people thought that was the War of the Worlds that came out. That was Tom Cruise. They're like, no, that's from Asylum.
Which is
that's not
exactly what the Asylum wanted.
Exactly.
So it's exactly what they wanted, was to create that confusion and make you rent it.
And that's what the Burning's going for here. Is like, oh, Friday the 13th. Yeah, it's about a camp and a killer. Yeah. Wait, this isn't related to the other one. Yeah, sure. It's camp and killers.
The poster doesn't help.
Sleepaway Camp, which was I think like a year later. I think Sleepaway Camp was 82, right?
It's 88. Sleepaway Camp. Oh no, 83. Sorry. Yeah, no, yeah, the first one, Sleepaway Camp, 83. So yeah. But that's a whole other story, which we're covering at the end of the month. Little spoiler there.
As well.
Awesome.
A little spoiler there. So, Ian, was there something that we didn't cover that you maybe wanted to ask about, or are we good?
No, I think this movie, it's kind of a shame that it wasn't more involved with the Cropsey legend, because I feel like instead of an old mine shaft, it would have been cool if it had taken place in the ruins of an abandoned, mental hospital. You could have built up this whole thing of like he was, kind of turned it into a Freddy Krueger version of that. Like he was an orderly or whatever at this hospital, that all this poor treatment, and these kids started disappearing and he was suspected. So maybe he got jailed or escaped, or the parents set him on fire. Just rip off the Freddy Krueger thing, but have this, Friday the 13th, they have the abandoned shack in the woods, where Jason has his shrine. Just turn that into the mental hospital. I think it'd be very effective.
No, you got a mental hospital that's near the summer camp. Okay. And Cropsey used to be a resident at the mental hospital, but as part of a work release program, he was working at the summer camp. Not exactly the best pick, but these movies, the employees are usually never the best pick. So he was working there. That's why he had the problem with the kids. So since you have the mental hospital nearby, he chases our final two kids. They end up running through the woods and come across this abandoned mental hospital now at this point or whatnot. And that's where he offs them. And you could still have it more familiarly.
Even better. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is also a time period where we really didn't have the chase yet, I think. Like, how many slasher movies like were there before this? Like, there were the Giallos in Italy,
right? Halloween,
Halloween, Black Christmas, Friday the 13th. Right. I can't really think of any others. So there really isn't anything to rip off at this point, except just the setting of summer camp, Killer on the Loose. And that seems to be all they had to work with, is if they were trying to rip anything off. I think it was just a cash grab more than a rip off of anything. I think it was just, this is in the zeitgeist now. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm just like, and if you don't know anything about Cropsey, as I don't think I did really when I watched The Burning for the first time, but hearing about the legend of it and then knowing the stuff about the mental hospital, it just does feel like if they were they could have done more than capitalize on the Cropsey name. They could have incorporated some of those elements to it to make it, I think, make a bit more sense, because this whole like mine shaft business comes out of nowhere.
It's just the mine shaft, before it was a summer camp, it was a coal mine. So there you go.
Sure. Camping in a coal mine. Yeah.
Camping in a coal mine. So there you have it, folks. Go ahead, Joe. Your final thought with The Burning.
I was gonna say, overall, I still think it's a fun. I think it's a fun one. I think it's one of the more fun summer camp slasher movies, and there's a lot of them. I think this is one of the better ones. So I'm on par with like the Friday the 13th sequels. I like it better than the original Friday the 13th. But I think Friday the 13th 4 and 6 are, I think, two perfect slasher movies. And I think they're probably among the best of the summer camp slasher films. So I kind of put it up there with those. And Sleepaway Camp, the first Sleepaway Camp, which I think is another one that we'll cover later in the month. But I think that's one of the best of its kind as well. I think it belongs up there with those.
Yeah.
Ian, any final thought with The Burning?
No, I kind of given my 2 cents.
And my nickel for whatever it's worth, as well as I enjoy The Burning quite a bit. I love watching these earlier genre films that kind of were starting out, and you can see them trying different things. It's kind of refreshing, because growing up in the 80s, later on, they were so cookie cutter after a while. You're like, okay, but you get something like The Burning, you're like, you could see them trying to do something different, and it works. Even with the ending with the mine shaft, that doesn't make a huge amount of sense. There's still this wonderful scene where Alfie is trapped by his bicep with the blades sitting there, and he's trying to get out, and it's just cutting him. There's a lot of great, wonderful scenes, and it actually has tension in it. Unlike later 80s films, there's actually some tense scenes in here, some interesting scenes. So yeah, check out The Burning if you haven't, folks. Hope this wet your whistle for not only The Burning, but looking into the Cropsey legend. I thank Joe for joining us here in the spoiler room. Always fun to have fresh blood show up. And now,
Thanks for having me on. This was fun.
Hey, we're always glad to have new folks and a new voice. And now this is always where I give the floor to my guests. It's your license to shill. So, Joe, go ahead, you first. Where can they find your stuff at? What do you got to shill?
Well, you pulled out the DVD of Deadly Xmas. That actually just this week started playing on Tubi, so you can go check that out. It's a parody of, well, this is the perfect time of year for it. It's a parody of Silent Night, Deadly Night, Black Christmas, Don't Open Till Christmas, all those fun 80s Santa slashers. If you want to check that out, that's on Tubi. Linnea Quigley is in it. Lloyd Kaufman, Joe Estevez, Robert Zadar, Felissa Rose, Darren Miller is our killer Santa Claus. Debbie Rashawn is in it. I'm sure I'm missing, some other well-known actor that people out there like. We got a lot of them together for this. It was a really fun shoot. The movie's about 10 years old now, but I'm glad to see it on Tubi because I think we're going to get more of an audience on Tubi versus just having it on DVD with no streaming. You can check that out. I'm also on the Literary License podcast. I'm on usually 3 episodes a month. This week we break it up into 4 chapters basically every month. The first week of the month, they usually do their book to screen, which I can't do Saturdays, so I can't do that with them. But the ones that they do on Fridays, which is Batman the Animated Series, that's what we're doing this week. Next week will be Remake, where we take an original film and a remake of a film, and we compare the two. Next week will be both versions of West Side Story, the Robert Wise and Steven Spielberg version. And at the end of the month for Christmas, just in time for the holidays, time where you get together and you have family over and you have these big sumptuous dinners, we're doing Cannibal the Musical and Eating Raoul.
Nice. Excellent stuff. So check out all that.
We've been nominated for a Rondo Award 4 or 5 times.
Nice.
It's a fun show. We go off on a lot of tangents. Some of the episodes end up being long. Like we just end up like riffing on whatever. Like I think like recently we're doing Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, and I think I went off 20 minutes on a tangent talking about like Laurel and Hardy and Snub Pollard and like 1920s and 30s era comedians for some stupid reason. But we always end up finding a way to like go off on like these weird tangents. But check us out. We're on most platforms. We are definitely on iTunes. Add me through Mark on Facebook. We constantly post the links of whatever shows we're doing. Definitely do check us out. And I will I'll let the audience on Literary License know to check this out if they want to hear more of me. And I'm sure they've heard enough of me though, but whatever.
Well, we appreciate you here as always, sir. And thanks for taking time out to join us in the spoiler room. And Mr. Ian Simmons, license to shill, sir.
Well, I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. It's also on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and look up Kicking the Seat, you'll find my channel. And I do weekly movie reviews and interviews and all sorts of roundtables and fun stuff. A little bit slow this week due to a bit of a snafu that happened today that I'll be kicking myself regarding for the next decade plus, which I told Mark about on the Patron show. So yeah, definitely check that out. And I think that's just about it. I'm also here every Tuesday talking movies with Mark. It's one of the highlights of my week. So thank you again.
Well, we appreciate you slumming it with us. So both of you slumming it here in the spoiler room. Just if anybody at all is interested in what we got going on in Special Mark Productions, last week I posted an interview with Donald Farmer, a veteran B-movie director who was just wonderful to talk to. He had an interesting story about the location where he shot his first version of Cannibal Hookers, which actually has a link inadvertently to Corey Udler and Derek Carey through like 6 degrees. So it's very interesting though, the story of the location, but he gave some, it was just a fun conversation altogether. We talked about his new film coming out at the beginning of 2023 called Debbie Does Demons, but we also talked about his career, and that was a lot of fun. So that's on our YouTube channel, as well as the Spoiler Room podcast channel. Here, I got reviews coming. I've got a backlog of more reviews. I got some discoveries going on that'll be dropping. I've got a review of IMDb Cooper coming out soon. That drops at the end of the week. We got 2 new reviews now for Guns of Eden and Battle of Saipan, 2 interesting films as well. So yeah, a lot of stuff. It was a light.
I gotta check that out. I like Greg Lamberson.
It was a lot of fun, that interview, and I'm still catching up with my backlog, but yeah, a lot more stuff to come. So thank you so much, folks, for tuning in to live. Angelique, always a pleasure. And until next time, we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Goodbye.
And